Have you ever wondered what our everyday objects look like in different parts of the world? Well, then this show is for you because that's what we do in the series Everything Ever! Previously, we talked about traditional bathing and water-related things in Africa, whereas today we will show you a bunch of Africa's everyday items related to hygiene and personal care. First, let's talk about traditional fans. Now, as I've mentioned before, some African architecture is built in a way that conditions the air, so Africa has a sort of traditional AC in that way. But what about when you're outside in the sun? Well, in that case, you may want a fan to cool off. The example on screen now comes from the Congo culture. The handle is made of wood and the round fan part is made of leather. Here's another example made of brass from the Yoruba culture of Nigeria. The fan, known as a bebe, connotes coolness in Yoruba thought. A fan can also represent Osun, goddess of fertility and beauty, because this item alludes to her elegance and her ability to bring relief to humanity. Also worth noting is that things don't always have to be custom made for a specific purpose. As you can see in this historical illustration, the Zulu king Mapande Ka Senzanga Kohuna, in which he is getting fanned with one of their iconic shields. Let me try pronouncing that name one more time. Mapande Ka Senzanga Kohona. Hell yeah, that sounds better. It should also be noted that fans aren't only meant for cooling off. In fact, they can do the exact opposite. This image I found in the dictionary Black African Civilization is described as a basketry fire fan made by the Massa people of Chad. If you've ever heard the phrase fan the flames of war or fan the flames of passion, well, that phrase literally comes from the fact that a fan can be used to blow air onto a fire so that it will burn more strongly, and apparently that's what this particular African fan was used for. The second tool on our list not only protects one from the heat but also from the rain, and that is an umbrella. You might recognize the Dahomey umbrellas. They showed up in some scenes of The Woman King. I did a video about that and other Dahomey artworks that showed up in that movie that you may want to check out. That said, the Dahomey aren't the only Africans who made fancy parasols. Here's an old photo of a Yoruba king, Oba Olateru Olabegi II, the Olawo of Owo. Seen here relaxing with an umbrella that's keeping the sun off of him. My favorite African parasols, though, would be the ones made by the Ashanti people. These umbrellas are in use during a number of different ceremonies and come in a variety of styles. Some even bear the famous Adinkra symbols, and beyond that can even be topped with golden finials. Here's a close-up of one of these fantastic umbrella ornaments. Besides shielding oneself from the elements, Africans, like everyone else in the world, want to protect themselves from pesky bugs. So how do they deal with annoying insects? The answer is a traditional fly swatter known as the fly whisk. But the fly whisk is far from just a functional bug swatter. In fact, a lot of fly whisks, especially fancier ones like this fly whisk from the Bale people, were rarely, if ever, actually used for swatting bugs, but instead they mainly served ceremonial purposes. Furthermore, many traditional leaders in Africa carry fly whisks as part of their regal accoutrements. It may sound odd to treat an object like this with so much respect, but it's more common than you may think. Pictured here, from left to right, we can see fly whisks from India, China, and Polynesia, all of which are equally magnificent in their own ways. As for those ceremonial purposes I mentioned, I think that can be a story for another time. Continuing with the whole protection theme, our next item defends you against cavities. It's the traditional African toothbrush, the teeth cleaning twig. Since I already made a whole video about the teeth cleaning twig, we aren't going to go into detail about that right now. But I felt the need to mention it because in these Everything Ever videos, it's important for me to list all the things that fit in the category of the day. So let's move on to nail care. In this image, we have a tool to manicure one's fingernails. This knife comes from the Enyoro ethnic group of Uganda. More specifically, it is a royal manicure knife used in the Bunyoro Kingdom. It is a finely polished blade with a copper handle. Its uses not only include filing down nails, but also the sharp point probably acted as a nail pick or cuticle remover. And now we move from the hands down to the feet. The Egyptians have this clay foot care rasp in the shape of a crocodile. In a book from 1836 titled An Account of the Manners and Customs of the Modern Egyptians, it explains what it was like to treat one's feet with a rasp of baked clay. There are two kinds of rasp used for this purpose. One is very porous and rough, and its rasping surface is scored with several lines. The other is of a fine closed clay, and the surface with which the rubbing is performed is rendered rough artificially. The rougher rasp is of indispensable utility to persons who do not wear stockings, which is the case of most of the inhabitants of Egypt. The other is for the more delicate, and is often used for rubbing the skin to render the skin smooth. Okay, so here's a scenario. Now that your feet are all smooth and callus-free, what happens if you're walking around and get a splinter in your foot? Well, in that case, you'll need some tweezers. The tweezers we're looking at here come from Egypt on the left and Madagascar on the right. And although they're mostly basic looking, some tweezers have a bit more visual flair, like this one that was found near the Zambezi River, which has a twisted grip. The Kamba of Kenya seem to have a variety of tweezers. The tiny tweezers aren't actually used for hygiene, but instead are tools to create chains. On the other hand, the bigger ones are used for hygienic purposes. These tweezers can pluck beard hairs. I've tried plucking my beard before, but it takes too long, so I usually just shave. However, I do pluck my chest hair. And yes, it does hurt, but you get used to it. Speaking of plucking hair, Ethiopians use tweezers for hair plucking as well, but instead of a man's beard, Ethiopian women sometimes pluck eyelashes. It's not for personal aesthetics though, but instead it's done for medical reasons. Unfortunately, there's a disease called trachoma which blinds people. This disease causes a person's eyelashes to turn inward and scrape the cornea, so people use tweezers to pull out their own eyelashes. Luckily, in modern times, a great amount of progress has been made in preventing this disease from blinding people, thanks to both antibiotics and surgeries. Now, I should note that plucking isn't the only way Africans remove hair. Shaving is also done in Africa. Here's a razor that has been identified as being either from Eritrea or Ethiopia. While we're on the topic of hair, I'll mention that I decided that hair-related items like combs and etc. will be a separate video in the future. For the time being, we're staying in Ethiopia to look at the equipment they use to clean their ears. What you're looking at is known as an ear cleaning pick. Side note, from what I can tell, ear cleaning picks existed in Europe and Asia as well. Besides being used to remove earwax, the Ethiopian ear pick is also a piece of jewelry which can be attached to a necklace. I suppose I should do the responsible thing and tell you that generally speaking, doctors in modern times warn against using ear cleaning picks and things like Q-tips, because if you aren't careful, you can damage your ears. Doctors nowadays, or at least the doctors that I've visited, usually suggest that you wet a rolled up tissue paper to clean your ears. Moving north to Egypt, we'll look at a perfume sprinkler the Egyptians called kwam. Now, before you laugh too much at that name, being the responsible person that I am, I should note that the word kwam is spelled with Q's, not C's. An inscription on the neck of the bottle reads, "May you have eternal glory, felicity, and long life in the morning and evening." The largest inscription on the bottle reads, "Glory to our Lord the Sultan al-Malik al-Nasir Nasir al-Dunya Waladin al-Malik al-Nasir Hassan." Obviously, this was made during Egypt's Islamic era, but I'd like to note that Egypt and other parts of Africa have manufactured aromatics since ancient times. I recently found a document called African Aromatherapy, Past, Present, and Future Applications by Stephanie Rose Bird. I haven't finished reading it yet, but perhaps we can go deeper into this topic of aromatics in a separate video. Another related item from Egypt is the incense burner, which, as you can probably tell, is much older than the perfume sprinkler we just looked at. Honestly, incense is more of a ritualistic thing, so it doesn't quite conform to today's category, but I figured I'd just mention it now in case I forget to include it in a future video. I also quickly want to note that Ethiopia uses incense burners too, as you can see see in this photo. Let's now turn our attention to balms, lotions, or skin creams, or whatever you want to call them. I'm just going to focus on one exemplar for this topic, which will be Shea Butter. This product is derived from a nut of the shea tree. Among various West African peoples, the traditional production of shea butter is a skill passed down from mother to daughter. A lot of work is involved in transforming these nuts into butter. A lot of work is involved in transforming these nuts into butter, and said shea butter is rich in vitamin A, which is a micronutrient needed for the growth of healthy skin and hair. Not only is shea butter used for skin creams, balms, moisturizers, and so on, but it also has its uses as medicine and soaps. We already covered soaps in our video about bathing, but for medicine, that will likely be a category for a whole nother video. Speaking of future videos, there was one last item I intended to finish the show with, but I decided that shea butter is a good one to end with. What mysterious hygienic item did I leave off the list? Well, it's something I think can have its own video. Sorry for the cliffhanger, folks. Feel free to guess what it is in the comments below. And if you want to make sure that you catch that episode and other videos, be sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Thank you all for watching.